Then in the 1950s, all the men came back from war in 49, and the country swung conservative again, right? And so that's when you get this sort of Leave It to Beaver idea of like men's roles and women's roles. Yeah, which means that lesbians were a threat to this concept, and so that is when persecution hit hard. So you have Senator Joseph McCarthy, and he is all about getting some communists, because by now the rise of the Communist Party has been like, this is a big thing.
Russians.
Exactly.
Over there Russian.
But here's the thing, he very happily conflated communism and communist beliefs with all things that were not what he considered to be mainstream beliefs, which means
politics works.
Exactly. So homosexuality in all of its forms became persecuted widely. And so you've got police raids on known gay bars, you've got like searches and seizures within the military ranks, particularly among women. And so like at the time, women in the military were subject to, in the middle of the night, searches of their rooms for anything that would show that they were either communist or lesbian.
What are these things? What are these things to prove your lesbianism?
Letters, photos,
It's my sister. What do you mean?
Yeah, it's like, why are you and your sister making out? That's weird.
Do I come to your home and ask you questions? No.
Right.
When was Stonewall?
So Stonewall was 69.
Yeah.
So we're getting close. We're getting to that.
We're getting there.
Yep. All right. So we're in the 50s. Hardcore persecution. It sucks. You get into the 60s, and the country has become really, really liberal, except for its views toward gays. And so, you've got the hippies who are pushing this whole notion of free love, which is super exciting. They're like, dude, threesomes and orgies are the best. And the birth control pill has come out. And so, straight women are having more sex than ever before, right? And so, now the argument that homosexuality is bad because it's non-reproductive sex is pretty fucking shaky because
now we're having
straight people having a whole bunch of non-reproductive sex. So a few folks are starting to agitate for their rights in a very reserved sort of way, and a lot of women are discovering lesbianism because of all these hippie orgies, because they're in a situation where there's like the man is living out his fantasy of being with two women, and the women are like, we can just do this. We don't need him. We can just do this.
Have our own part.
Exactly. So, that was all going down. But come 1969, especially because of just the laws surrounding queerness and the persecution of the gay bars is still very much going on. You have particularly trans women of color. And at the time, they were known as drag queens or transvestites. They were the ones who got the worst because the laws on a lot of the books basically said that if you were a man, you had to wear 3 articles of men's clothing at all times, or you would be subject to arrest. And the same thing for women. If you're a woman, you had to be wearing at least 3 articles of women's clothing, or you'd be subject to arrest. So if you were either a trans man or a trans woman and you could pass, then you're walking a really fine line, but you were more or less safe. But if you were anywhere in this nebulous in between, then you were in danger of arrest, of getting kicked out of your house, losing your job, like all the stuff. Like they would put names in newspapers and people would lose their livelihoods. Wow. So come 1969, and police go to raid the Stonewall, like they do, because it's the habit now at this point. And you have these queer, trans, gender non-binary, mostly people of color to begin with, who are just sick of it, just completely done with it. And so when the police come in, they thought they were in for like another easy roundup.
Oh no,
not so at all.
No.
Not so at all. And so they fought back, and there were not many people in the Stonewall at the time. It was only like less than 20 folks, 20, 30 tops, who were actually inside the bar. They got out to the street, they started, protesting, fighting back, throwing bottles, shot glasses, like whatever they had at hand, yelling at the cops, and gays in the surrounding area were like, what's going on?
It was like a bat signal.
We're fighting back. Oh yeah.
Hell yeah.
It went from like 20 or 30 to like hundreds. and it lasted for like 4 nights in a row.
Yeah.
So Stonewall kind of became like the rallying cry, right? That was like the thing that sparked the gay revolution as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
So roll into the 1970s. You've got way more organizations that are fighting for their rights, but you have within them, so you've got the feminists, right? So second wave feminist movement, and these are women who are fighting for their rights, for women specifically.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the gay rights movement, which is mostly led by, white gay men.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're fighting for a specific set of rights. And you've got individuals who feel like they're part of both groups, and they're like, we're not getting all of our needs met.
Yeah.
And you know what? I don't necessarily believe that lesbianism is a biological imperative, this story that we've been telling ourselves since like the 1910s.
Mm-hmm.
What if we chose?
Mm-hmm.
So for the last 100 years at this point, they've been saying, or at least 80 years, they've been saying that, if your daughter is a feminist, there's a fair chance that she's a lesbian. And so these new lesbian feminists were like, yeah. It's like, we will own all of that. And yes, we will, like, the ultimate feminism is to be a lesbian, because if you're out in the streets fighting for the rights of women, how are you going to go home to a man?
Ooh.
Right?
Ooh.
And so these people became the most visible homosexuals in the country because they were out there and they were doing everything. If you think about women's music festivals,
Mm-hmm.
that was lesbian feminists. If you think about like books and magazines and stuff that was portraying women in a more generous light, right? Because up until that point, starting in like the 1930s, you were not allowed to write a book in which 2 women fell in love with each other and had a happy ending. They could fall in love with each other and then fucked up shit happened, and then one of them went straight and the other one went crazy. Like, those were allowed. That was the book. That was a whole lot of books, especially in the 30s and the 50s.
Yeah.
And lesbian feminists were like, no, we get to have happy endings because we've seen them. They exist.
Yeah.
And so they started telling those stories. And so by being super, super visible, they started changing hearts and minds. To an extent, because here's the thing, they were crazy rigid in their beliefs. They were like, when you think of feminism, when people say like, I believe in equality, but I'm not a feminist, it's because the lesbian feminists kind of fucked it up for everybody.
Those damn lesbian feminists.
You know what I mean? Because like they were like so extreme. They were like straight up man-hating.
Yeah.
To the point where like if you, like they would provide daycare at the music festivals, but if you had a male child, they were like, I don't know if you should bring him. You know what I mean? Like they were like that. This whole idea of like, lesbians have really bad sense of fashion, that was them. They made that happen. they're like, you can't wear lipstick or dresses or skirts or pantyhose because those are tools of the patriarchy. However, if you're on the butch side of things, you can't wear suits and jackets and shit like that either, because that's trying to emulate the patriarchy. And so their whole thing was like, okay, well, you can wear jeans, a t-shirt made out of, like natural fibers, and then if it was a special occasion, you could go to the thrift shop and you can get you a vest and a fedora. And like that was the dress code. It was strict. So like there was a lot of things that was just really not particularly savory about the lesbian feminists that put a lot of people off. But they managed to get a whole bunch of stuff done because they changed the face of women's music. They changed the face of women's literature. They changed the face of like just the fight for equal rights in general, because they were crazy vocal. They were dedicated. Like they were the front lines of the women's movement, whether the women's movement wanted them or not. They were in it. And so they got a lot of stuff done. So then we roll into like the 1980s, where the country's gone conservative again. Reagan gets elected, which is really interesting to think about. It's really interesting to think about, right? So this is a point in time where like the gays have become really visible. Black people have got civil rights going on. You have, a lot of rights coming up for Mexican Americans because of the Chicano movement. And so the Democrats are running on a platform of this liberal equality and openness, right? And they're like, yes, we support gay rights, we support all this stuff. And then they were really shocked when the country elected a TV star, movie star, who was all about the exact opposite of all the things that we were into. Sound familiar?
History. Just repeats itself again and again and again. What will we learn?
But, you know, in the 1980s, you have all these women who had been educated in the 60s and in the 70s because they were going to college in like larger numbers than ever before. And now they're getting jobs. And because of the work the lesbian feminists had done in, you know, increasing the level of equality and job opportunities and anti-discrimination laws and stuff like that, these women could get jobs in like the corporate world in a way in which they had never done before. Because up until about like the 60s, like late 50s, early 60s, you could be a teacher, you could be a
nurse,
you could be a nurse, you could be a prostitute.
Yeah,
you know,
oldest profession.
Yeah, oldest profession. But yeah, like the number of, and you could be a secretary. Like the number of professions open to women was very, very narrow. But in the 1980s, the career woman exploded, and they were everywhere.
I remember one of the lawyers that I work with was telling me that she got her first position in like 80s, like 91 or something, and all of the female lawyers wore the same like dress code, blue suits, maybe a little blue ascot if you wanted to like actuate your femininity. But you was gonna wear blue every day. Which is like, we're like in this work field, this is our uniform, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Props. Not everybody looks good.
No.
Just like the t-shirts with the vests and the fedora. I feel like I would have had major issues with the dress code. Like, I really want to be here and with y'all. But if I want to wear my three-piece suit, I'm going to wear my three-piece suit.
Exactly it. And the thing is, too, like, they were not very intersectional. So, like, they were trying, you know, they're like, yeah, we need to get women of color on board. And they're like, but you don't.
But not you.
You're not doing things that are conducive to us. You know what I mean? Like, especially like women of color, you know, they're looking at the whole separatist movement and they're like, it doesn't make sense to be separated from men entirely. They are the other half of the population. We have fathers, we have brothers, we have cousins, uncles, and people that we actually care about, even if we are gay, you know, and they're in a struggle for their rights too. So how are we going to jump ship and only want to be over here? Like, that didn't make sense to a lot of women of color. So, but in the 1980s, like, you saw kind of like a divergence where there were all these different lesbian groups coming up that were representing specifically women of color. So you had the Black lesbians, the Chicano lesbians, Latina lesbians, Asian lesbians, fat Black lesbians. Like, everybody was talking about what they needed as a group rather than trying to fit into the general umbrella of things.
Intersectionality.
For real.
Rose world. Whoa. So how did you just sit down and read Old Girl's book 20 times? Like, how did you piece all of this together?
Yeah, so I did read one book, and it was my fourth reading of it. It's called Odd Girls and Twilight Lovers, and for some reason I'm forgetting the name of the author right now. It will come back to me later. But basically it is that. It is the history of lesbianism in the United States. And so, you know, when I did my talks, it's not just, you know, reiterating the stuff in the book like I did just now, but it's also weaving in the stories of individuals who I actually painted. So, so in my last show, I had 7 paintings. Billie Holiday, Billie Jean King, Josephine Baker. I have Audre Lorde. Jane Addams, Sally Ride, and Marsha P. Johnson, and Sylvia Rivera. And so, you know, each of these women lived in a very different era, right? Starting in the Victorian era up until the 1980s. And so I used the story, you know, from Odd Girls and Twilight Lovers as the backdrop for all of the things that these specific women were dealing with within the context of their own lives.
That's so dope. So what is in store for us for the future? What's next? What's coming?
So the next round of paintings is actually going to be about women in the performing arts.
Okay.
And it will be at a place called Your Soul's Movement. It is a dance studio in Park Hill.
Okay.
And so I am in study mode now. My first subject that I'll be painting is a woman named Maria Tallchief. Okay. And she was the first American prima ballerina. And not only that, she's also half Osage, Native American. And so that made her, you know, kind of brought her to this extra level of prominence.
Nice.
And so I'm reading her autobiography right now and just kind of learning about her life and all the things she dealt with at the time.
Yeah. So you read, for like your last series, you read 7 autobiographies.
I put forth a valiant effort. So here's the challenge with my work, is that because women's history is not a major subject that a lot of people cover and talk about. Some women's stories literally only exist in children's books. So it's challenging. So when I can find an autobiography, I'm incredibly excited. When I can find a biography of any kind that was written for adults, super excited. But really, I just do the best I can with what I've got, because I am not naturally an historian, so I don't go looking for source material. I literally don't have that kind of time.
Yeah. Well, now you're one of those persons that have that source of information about these women. You're getting them out of the children's books and into these prominent spots in our history and in society where they belong.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And I'm hoping it'll have a reciprocal effect, where like historians will see what I'm doing and be like, oh, you know what, that could be more fleshed out. Like, somebody please write a book for me, because I got nothing.
You gotta know your place.
Exactly.
You gotta know your wheelhouse.
Yeah,
You just stay there and you wave at everybody else.
It's like, I'll do the cover.
There you go. There you go. Yay! Alrighty, is there anything else that we should know about your fantasticalness?
Yeah, I would say that's kind of the majority of it. Check out my website, afrotriangledesigns.com.
Yes.
That's where I have all the paintings. You want to order prints on there. I've got that. I've got t-shirts. And, just as I do more, produce more, I'll be posting that up on my page.
Well, I am so geeked to see what you're going to do. And I'm so geeked to put some things on these walls. I have the one painting that's finally gone up, but I'm really excited because Josephine Baker is my boo.
Yeah.
Josephine Baker's my boo.
And just ordered a whole batch of paint prints, so
yeah,
coming.
I'm here for it. Yay! Well, thank you so much. I learned so much, so many things that like about like women's history. You know that society changes with every new generation, and that the thinking and everything changes. But when you see how it weaves together, when you see how it falls on the timeline, and just like even the idea that people think that like being queer is like this new thing that everybody's just trying to do recently.
It's like, no. Sappho was writing about queerness in BC 1200. It was nuts.
Exactly. Like, humans have been queer since there have been humans.
Pretty much. Yeah.
So, just educating one person at a time is all we can do.
Work in progress.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I will put all of the links to her social media down below. Buy her prints. Buy me her prints. Just buy prints. Make that happen. We're waiting on this series of t-shirts. I am geeked for the series of t-shirts. All of her social media is down below. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Do you want to be featured on Sexuality? Do you do something that's super cool and super interesting? Then I want to talk to you. So let me know. Links are down below, and I will see y'all later. Bye.
Yes.